Tens of thousands of people have been displaced by renewed fighting along the Thailand-Cambodia border.
At first glance, this war should be simple. Thailand is stronger. It has modern fighter jets, better weapons, and one of the most capable militaries in Southeast Asia. So the natural assumption is obvious. More power should mean a faster end, but instead, the opposite is happening. The conflict isn't shrinking, it's hardening. Tension isn't fading, it's becoming permanent. And that leads to an uncomfortable question. What if Thailand's military power is not ending this war, but quietly making it harder to finish? Because power doesn't just give you the ability to strike. It gives you responsibility, expectations, and consequences. And once a war reaches that stage, winning battles becomes easier than ending the conflict itself. That's the paradox at the heart of this war, and the reason strength alone is no longer enough to bring it to a close. For most of modern history, military power had a clear purpose. You built strength to end wars quickly. You overwhelmed the enemy. You forced surrender, and the fighting stopped. That logic still feels intuitive, and it's exactly why people expect Thailand to be able to finish this conflict. But this war is not being fought in that old framework. Thailand is not trying to occupy Cambodia. It is not trying to remove a government. And it is not trying to redraw the regional order by force. This is a limited border conflict, and in wars like this, power works differently. Military strength no longer creates freedom of action. It creates obligation. Every strike must be justified. Every escalation must be controlled. Every use of force must avoid political and economic fallout. So instead of ending the war, Thailand's power traps it inside a narrow space, strong enough to prevent defeat, but constrained enough to prevent closure. This is where traditional ideas of victory collapse. Power still decides battles, but it no longer decides when wars end. Thailand's military advantage is not an illusion. It controls the air. It can strike faster, farther, and more precisely than Cambodia. It has the ability to dominate any direct engagement along the border. That advantage gives Thailand confidence, but it also creates pressure. Because once a country is clearly stronger, every action is scrutinized. If Thailand strikes, people ask why it was necessary. If it pauses, people ask why strength is not being used. Every decision becomes political, not just military. This is the hidden cost of power. Strength raises expectations that cannot all be satisfied at the same time. Show restraint, and critics accuse weakness. Show force, and critics accuse escalation. So Thailand is forced into constant management mode, not just managing the battlefield, but managing optics, markets, diplomacy, and domestic opinion. That is why power stops being a clean solution. Instead of creating an exit, it creates responsibility. Instead of ending the conflict, it locks the stronger side into maintaining it. Thailand's advantage gives it control, but that control comes with a burden that makes walking away far harder than winning another battle. Air power is designed to do three things very well: punish, deter, control tempo. Thailand's military can do all three. It can strike positions, disrupt movement, and remind the other side that escalation will be costly. On the battlefield, this works. But wars like this are not decided on the battlefield alone. Air power can clear an area, but it cannot hold it. It cannot erase historical claims. It cannot neutralize symbolism tied to borders, temples, or national pride. Once the aircraft leave, the ground resets. Forces return, tension resumes. So every use of power solves a short-term problem while leaving the long-term conflict untouched. This is the closure problem. Power resets situations, not disputes. It manages symptoms, not causes. And when a war's cause is political and symbolic, military dominance cannot deliver a final outcome. That's why the conflict keeps returning to the same point. Thailand wins engagements, Cambodia avoids collapse, and the war continues, not because power is absent, but because power alone cannot produce an ending that both sides can accept. The war continues because Thailand and Cambodia are not paying the same price for time. For Cambodia, survival itself is a form of success. As long as it is not defeated, it retains leverage. Every month the conflict drags on proves that Thailand cannot force a clean outcome. Time works for the weaker side. Thailand faces the opposite reality. The longer the conflict continues, the more pressure builds, economically, politically, and diplomatically. Markets react to instability, tourism suffers, international scrutiny increases, so Thailand faces a dilemma with no easy exit. Escalate further and risk backlash that outweighs the military gain, restrain itself, and accept a conflict that never truly ends. Either choice favors the weaker side. This is the asymmetric incentive problem. Cambodia benefits from delay. Thailand pays for it. And when one side gains leverage simply by enduring, while the other bleeds from waiting, the war stops being about winning battles. It becomes about who can tolerate the consequences longer. That imbalance, not firepower, is what keeps this conflict alive. Military power is supposed to reduce risk. In this conflict, it does the opposite. Thailand's strength gives it more to lose. Its economy is deeply connected to regional stability. Tourism reacts instantly to tension. Investors watch borders more closely than battlefields. That means every escalation carries costs far beyond the front line. A single incident can shake market confidence, trigger diplomatic pressure, force public explanations at home. Cambodia does not face the same exposure. It absorbs military pressure, but it does not absorb the same level of economic or reputational damage. Its strategy is built around endurance, not normalcy. This flips the logic of power. Thailand's superiority becomes a burden because it must constantly manage consequences that Cambodia does not carry equally. Strength demands restraint. Restraint prolongs the conflict, and prolongation increases cost. So power stretches the war instead of ending it. The stronger side spends more just to keep the situation from getting worse, while the weaker side only needs to avoid collapse. In conflicts like this, power doesn't disappear. It just becomes heavier to carry. This conflict doesn't have a clear ending because there is no acceptable final move. There is no surrender scenario, no decisive battle that settles everything, no outcome that allows one side to declare victory without consequences. Thailand's power prevents collapse, but it also prevents escalation to a point where the conflict is finished. Cambodia's endurance prevents defeat, but it also blocks closure. So the war exists in a narrow space, too intense to ignore, too limited to resolve. Border wars like this don't end the way people expect. They pause, they freeze, they return. Thailand's strength keeps the conflict contained. Cambodia's strategy keeps it unresolved. And when one side cannot lose and the other cannot finish, the war doesn't move forward. It circles. This is the core truth many people struggle to accept. Thailand's military power is real. It works. It dominates the battlefield. But that power does not come with an exit. It allows Thailand to control escalation, not eliminate it. It prevents defeat, but it also prevents closure. Cambodia doesn't need to win this war. It only needs to make sure it never ends cleanly. And Thailand, despite its strength, must carry the cost of every decision, whether it acts or holds back. That is why this conflict keeps going, not because Thailand is weak, not because Cambodia is strong, but because in modern border wars, power decides how a war is fought, not when it ends. And the hardest wars to escape are not the ones you're losing. They're the ones you're strong enough to keep alive.